Welcome to the Economy magazine at I-24 News, where we give you the biggest stories in global business and innovation. I'm Natalie Ehrlich. Well, coming up, child labor is on the decline worldwide, but hardly abating in India. And Iran's only gateway to the Indian Ocean eagerly awaits an end to sanctions. But first, let's start with the headlines. Well, Asian stocks slipped on Tuesday as world financial markets brace for the possibility of a Greek default. Greece only has 2 weeks now before it has to repay 1.6 billion euros to the IMF. And with Athens and its European creditors hardening their stances on Monday, investors are even more wary that the two sides won't be able to reach a solution. Meanwhile, European Central Bank head Mario Draghi signaled the ECB would keep approving emergency funding to Greek banks, but only as long as they have enough cash and collateral to function.
Such a strong and credible agreement with Greece is needed, not only in the interest of Greece, but also of the euro area as a whole. While all actors will now need to go the extra mile, the ball lies squarely in the camp of the Greek government to take the necessary steps.
Well, U.S. industrial production unexpectedly slipped 0.2% in May. Economists had expected it to rise 0.2%. Despite a slew of positive economic indicators in retail sales, employment, as well as small business confidence, softness in manufacturing and mining has persisted since December, largely attributed to a strong dollar and spending cuts in energy, hampering economic growth in the second quarter. Well, the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe has ditched the country's currency for the U.S. greenback. On Monday, the bank began its quest to retrieve all remaining old currency. Ravaged by hyperinflation in 2008, the Zimbabwean dollar peaked at 500 billion%. The central bank now says citizens have until September to exchange their remaining bills for the few dollar bills they are actually worth.
A lot of people were quite very aggrieved as they felt they'd lost a lot of money after we had converted in February of 2009 into US dollar terms. So as a Chamber of Commerce, we believe this could be a right move for the government in trying to restore sanity, not only in the financial sector, but also the real sector economy.
And apparel retailer Gap says that over the next few years, it will close a quarter of Gap specialty stores in North America. The move is expected to hurt thousands of jobs as the company struggles with slumping sales. A slew of fashion miscalculations caused the shoppers to turn to rivals such as H&M, Zara, and Forever 21. Well, the American retailer didn't say just how many jobs would be affected by store closures. As of January this year, Gap had about 141,000 full and part-time workers in some 37 stores worldwide. Internationally, child labor has decreased substantially in recent years. However, it does remain a huge problem in India. According to UNICEF, an estimated 28 million children between the ages of 5 and 14 in India are currently working, mostly to help their families survive.
There are now 168 million children around the world forced to work. This number has decreased by a third since 2000. This is a statistic from an ILO study. The International Labor Organization published the paper on Friday, June 12th, for the International Day Against Child Labor. And among the countries affected by this epidemic, India stands out.
I want to go to school. Often my hands hurt when I pick up the garbage and the waste smells very bad, but I'm doing this to help my parents.
About 5 million children under 14 are working, mostly to help their families survive. Nearly 1 in 3 Indians are living on less than $2 a day.
No, I cannot ensure the needs of my home without the help of my 3 girls. If they do not work, where will we find money to buy food? My wife, my children, and myself, we all work together, and yet we only earn 400 to 500 rupees a day. It's about $7 to $8.
On May 13th, a law on child labor was amended. Children under 18 years old cannot be employed in hazardous jobs. However, this new amendment allows children under 14 to be employed in family businesses. The law is too vague and leaves open the door for many abuses. A new, stricter draft of the law should be presented to Parliament in the coming months. But for many, the solution lies in education.
If the level of education is improved, it can make things happen. A simple means to end child labor is by giving them a good education, and also by showing both children and parents how important it is.
Improving education will modernize the labor market and enable young people to find skilled work. According to the latest OECD data, just over 30% of those under 24 have a job.
Well, for further insight on this important subject, we are joined on set by our one and only Daniel Roth. Thank you so much for being with us. So what can you add to this?
Well, it's important to note that India is getting better. We see globally there's still 170 million children working out there. India, as you mentioned, it's still millions and millions of children under 14, despite laws that have shifted. But India is getting better. So on one hand, we see a growing middle class. On the other hand, we still see a third of Indians living under $2 a day, which is enormous. Still about 2 billion people around the world live on that much a day. But in India, we're talking about a third in a country that, by and large, we tend to think of today anyways as an emerging market. So a third of people living under $2 a day is a big, big number. This is the number one reason that we see so many children being forced to work, being forced either through family pressure, through cultural pressure, for many, many reasons being forced to work.
That is an important point that you're making here, because inequality is an important topic that we do cover here regularly. And it is surprising because in the first quarter, India had a GDP Q1 of 7.5%, surpassing even China. So clearly here we have a stark difference in income between the haves and the have-nots.
Absolutely, and this is another indication. We see it all the time when we're looking at GDP. We tend to look at that as the be-all and end-all marker of success for a country. And we can see, again, when you see there's millions of children under 14, despite shifts in federal laws in India, you kind of get the understanding that GDP doesn't actually tell you the real story, the story that's really going on underneath when you have so many people working because they need to.
Well, what is the global reality for children worldwide?
So this is an interesting question, because what's happening worldwide is that children are getting the short end of the stick in a number of free trade agreements. So globalization is a process we've been seeing for the last few decades. Since the early 1980s, we've seen the liberalization of trade rules. So even as borders remain up for people, borders are dropping down for goods and services and money flowing worldwide. This can be good in certain respects, but certainly for when we're talking about this happening in a context of deregulation, you start to see more and more what are termed sweatshops, more and more children under 14 not being required to go to work and instead being required, not being required to go to school and instead being required to work, because there aren't regulations in place, because international standards are dropping as opposed to rising.
Well, that's a really interesting irony that you point out here. Any certain trade that is coming into light now? I mean, I know that the U.S. is talking with the Pacific region to expand on trade. Is there any implication there for the children that are working perhaps in areas of Asia?
Absolutely. This is a big question. So the TPP is at the front of everyone's agenda. One of the big problems is nobody who's not in those talks knows what's really written in there. So everyone assumes that it's a deregulation, that it's liberalization, that it's going to be, again, good for good services and money and bad for working class people around the world. But nobody really knows yet, and that's one of the really scary things about that and other deals is they tend to happen behind closed doors. So what are we to assume other than maybe this isn't so good for children who are looking for societies that are going to raise up standards of education and drop down requirements of working so that their families survive?
Well, thank you as ever for your insights and making those points. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, we move now on from India to Iran. The prospect of a nuclear deal there with Iran is giving hope to locals and even nearby India that Iran's only gateway to the Indian Ocean could soon be back in business.
No sign of transatlantic cargo ships yet in Iran's southeastern port of Chabahar. This free trade zone has long provided countries in Southeast and Central Asia with a gateway to trade with Iran. But many foreign companies left after the West slapped international sanctions on the country for relaunching its controversial nuclear program in 2005. Now, with the prospect of a nuclear deal and an easing of economic sanctions, the tide appears to be turning.
It shouldn't take long because many foreign companies that were previously present in Chabahar have already started last year to get ready for a strong return to the free trade zone.
Iran has lifted many restrictions on Chabahar to sweeten the deal for investors. 20 years of tax exemptions, reduced custom duties, and 100% guarantee on invested capital and profits. About 2,000 companies, half of them from Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the Gulf, are already present. There are now plans to turn the zone into a hub for petrochemical activities and a potential tourist destination.
Things were different here in the past. Now there's progress and life is getting better. There weren't many houses before, but they've started building new houses. And many workers are choosing to relocate and live here because we have the sea and more entertainment than before.
The zone boasts beautiful beaches and a large commercial area where buyers can snap up goods 30 to 40% cheaper than in the rest of Iran. But the area, home to a large Sunni minority in a predominantly Shiite country, is plagued with security issues. No attacks have been registered in Chabahar since 2012, but armed clashes are recurrent in the rest of the province. Local authorities hope economic progress will be a catalyst for change.
Development and prosperity will lay the groundwork for security issues. But locals should also get involved when it comes to these problems.
Projects have also been announced to improve the port area's underdeveloped infrastructure with a new highway and hotels and a revamped local airport. Chabahar, Iran's trading gateway, looks set to open up to the world once more.
Well, with us again on set is our very own Daniel Roth for a look at the presidential race in the United States, with a focus now on Jeb Bush. Well, Jeb Bush is officially running for president.
Absolutely, he is, and he came out swinging, and like Hillary Clinton just before him, his big focus has been on economics, and we're seeing this across the races, across the primaries. Economics is the thing, and if you look, the headlines really vary. So you have Business Insider, for example, that says, okay, basically, Jeb Bush has come out with a proposal for economic policy that is totally unrealistic, versus media outlet like Fox News that essentially their headline was quoting Jeb Bush as saying, "I'm going to make America into an economic superpower again." So it's really across the board in terms of the reactions to this. What he promised was to bring American GDP growth to 4% per year and to add 19 million jobs to the American economy. Most analysts say this is ridiculous. These are campaign promises that can never and will never be a part of anyone's presidency, and so it's an interesting thing to come out of the gate with. But these are the promises he made. Just for comparison's sake, American GDP between 2009 and now has been annually about 2.2%, and since Barack Obama took office, about 7 million jobs were added. Now, this was sort of in the wake of the second worst economic disaster in world history. Right. So those were the numbers in that case. Now, Jeb Bush is, of course, promising an enormous amount more.
Right. Well, to play devil's advocate here, he was apparently a champion for the Floridian economy, where he was governor.
Absolutely. So this is an important note. When American growth was about 3.4%, Floridian growth under his governorship was a percentage point higher than that, over 4%. And one of the things to note is that lots of states see this kind of growth when they're doing well. Federally, it's just not been happening historically. It's just not a reality historically. So that's one of the differences. One of the other big things is the two big things in his pocket as governor was tourism, which is an important part of the Floridian economy. The other was housing, though, and he was governor from 99 to 2007 during what we know now as a housing bubble, people buying and building without the money to do so. So while you can't necessarily blame him for the collapse, a lot of those numbers in the growth of Florida were really inflated because of the housing bubble. He left office in 2007, just before things went haywire.
So the timing perhaps was just in his favor.
Absolutely, and one of the other notes is that a lot of the economic policy that he had was based on tax cuts, which a lot of people criticize as sort of cutting for the wealthy, not for the working class and middle class, and really adding to the growing inequality in the United States.
Well, really interesting point there. It shall be very fascinating race indeed, and we will be looking out for that here at the Economy Show at I-24 News. Thank you, Daniel Roth, as always. That wraps up our coverage today. Do stay tuned tomorrow for the latest in global business and innovation. From the Jaffa Port in Tel Aviv, I'm Natalie Ehrlich. Thank you for watching.